I've been telling stories about a slave woman named, well, her name is Fugitive. Her name escapes totalitarian control like a fugitive. Her name cannot be fully estimated, pronounced, articulated, rendered intelligible. But there is a story of a woman who traversed the Atlantic, especially in the heydays of the North Atlantic slave trade, or the transatlantic slave trade, pardon me. And she was taken from somewhere in West Africa to Brazil, where I met her recently. Um, I met her bones, in fact, in the ground, where somewhere in Brazil, in Rio de Janeiro, called Cais do Valongo, um, during the time when they were preparing for the Olympics, I think in 2006, if I remember correctly. I might be wrong on that. 2010, I don't know. Um, uh, someone, a lady was making adjustments, repairs in her home, and they opened up the ground, and there were bones in the ground. And she thought there were bones of cats and dogs until she found that they were the bones of a woman. Um, Archaeologists came in and scientists came in, and they found that this was they found hundreds of bodies, littered in Caisto Valongo. They focused on this woman and they gave her the name Bakita, which is named after a Sudanese slave woman, another Sudanese slave woman who became a nun and a saint. Um, and I met Bakita, and I remember staying by her grave site, which is still open, just covered with some kind of plexiglass in a museum dedicated to her memory and the memory of the slaves arrived in Brazil. And I remember sitting there and having a very distinct feeling that cracks are opening up everywhere in the world, that the world is replete with cracks. And these cracks are invitations to descend. The Greeks called it katabasis. It's a performance of descent that in times of crisis, when there's seismic shifts and troubles afoot, there will be fault lines and fissures. And it's in those places that we build sanctuaries. It's in those places that we train our ears to listen to the gods that are screaming out from those cracks. And that is, I feel, where the feminine is. I wouldn't even fully designate it as a feminine because there the notion of the feminine is indeterminate. It's not singularly, categorically in some kind of absolute pure form, the feminine. It's the undoing of the binary that exists between the feminine and the masculine. It's the fugitive, it's the yet to come. We don't know how to categorize it. And that's why Donna Haraway, the biologist activist, would invite us to stay with the trouble. We're used to naming things, we're used to knowing where things fit. These cracks in the ground are invitations to revisit those concepts. And in revisiting those concepts, we revisit ourselves. So I shy away from thinking of it as the rise of the feminine because it seems to play into the notion that power is about being recognized. It's about building superstructures and phallic towers and skyscrapers on the ground. Whoever sits at atop these towers owns power. I'm more attuned to the power of soil and depths, which is largely invisible, but that's where everything seems to thrive most.